I guess people say, well, it was just very convenient that the rules you decided to apply were ones that suited your own personal opinion about Brexit. That's the
right. Okay, but if on the other hand, okay, Philip, but if on the other hand I had decided, right, well, I might be accused of making a judgment on the basis of my view, therefore I'll do the opposite, that would have meant closing down the very opportunity for parliamentary independence, which would otherwise be championed by the honourable gentleman, the member for Shipley, and indeed by the right honourable member for Tatton.
The other thing is, this is another area where people say, well, you were making these decisions to please Sally.
Oh.
Is there anything in that at all?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, look, the Conservative Party has never been very comfortable with me having a spouse who holds views against them. She was sometimes very outspoken in making clear her hostility to the Conservative Party. And one could argue the toss about whether she should have done that or not. I always defended her, but in any case, this is an interview of me, not of her. But I remember once, Philip, I say this good-naturedly, in my own constituency, there was a local member who wrote to me to say she was most perturbed to read that Sally might be seeking to become a Labour Member of Parliament. And she thought that this would be most improper. And she wrote me a letter saying, I have always believed that a husband and wife should face the world together. And I wrote back to this woman and said, dear Caroline, I note your views. Forgive me, but I would like to respond equally robustly. When you say that you don't think it is right that the wife of the Speaker should be a Member of Parliament, I think what you really mean is you don't think it's right that she should be a Labour Member of Parliament. I don't think you'd be objecting if she was a Conservative Member of Parliament. And I would very gently remind you, Esther, as a North West MP, that one of your predecessors in the North West, the member for Macclesfield, was of course Nicholas Winterton. Well, Nicholas Winterton stood for election as Speaker in 2000, and then again when I stood successfully in 2009. And on both occasions that he stood, his wife was a Member of Parliament. And I don't remember anybody saying, oh, well, we can't have Winterton as Speaker because Anne's a member and he'll be biased in favour of it. This is nonsense. What it was that the Tory party didn't like the fact that Sally was a lefty. And so, look, I mean, that is part of the prejudice. They didn't like the fact that she was a lefty.
But you like stoking
there were plenty of Conservatives who didn't like the fact that I was lower class. One of them described me as an oik, an exceptionally stupid Conservative Member of Parliament who is no longer in the House of Commons, said to a mutual friend, he didn't realise he was talking to a friend of mine, he said, trouble with Bercow is that I don't want to be unkind about it, the trouble with Bercow is he's an oik. And can I say to you as a friend, that, when the Labour Party got the Speaker, one sort of rather expects a probably a little working class chap or a working class woman as a Speaker. But when we, the Conservatives, have the chair, we sort of want to have a gentleman in the chair. And the trouble with Bercow is he's an oik. So there was a bit of that, and then there was the Conservative MP who is no longer in the House, who said to me at a very early stage, Bercow, if I had my way, people like you wouldn't be in this place. And I said, when you say people like me, do you mean because I'm lower class or because I'm Jewish? To which, without a moment's hesitation, he replied, both. So neither of you has ever treated me with anything other than courtesy, friendliness, and warmth. And whatever our political differences, we've always got on very well. But I was on the receiving end of a great deal of prejudice.
Things have moved on from that now, and people would say definitely with the smashing of the red wall and the blue wall, surely things have moved on the
I would hope so.
Front, on every other front.
Esther, I would hope so. I mean, the honest answer is I would very much hope so. Don't forget, I'm not in the House. Not only, as your viewers will be aware, am I no longer the Speaker, but I'm not a Member of Parliament anymore. So if I'm really candid with you, I don't know about the 2019 intake. I mean, I'm aware of some of them, but I don't know.
But you think there's still a class problem in politics?
I think it's a much lesser problem than it used to be. But I think there's still, to be honest, there's still quite a lot of snobbery in society. I wouldn't just say in politics. I would say across society there's still quite a lot of snobbery. And one point that I think, we perhaps would all agree on, it's not quite what you're asking me about, but I'm sort of trying, in a sense, to meet you halfway for all the things we might disagree about, or you might object to my position on, or feel you've got to ask me about. I think one thing we'd probably agree on is that whatever the merits, and I think there are very great merits in trying to get more women into Parliament and more ethnic minorities and more people who've experienced disability and so on, there's a lot to be said for having a lot more people from ordinary backgrounds in Parliament, a lot more people from working class communities. And, why should it always be people who've had the top jobs? People often say, it'd be good to have more doctors in Parliament. Well, it'd also be good to have more nurses in Parliament. Or it might be good to have more head teachers in Parliament. It might be good to have more teachers in Parliament. And it might be good to have some bus drivers in Parliament and so on. I would like to see a much more eclectic mix. I think we have made, to be honest, big progress, and I think both parties have made big progress. I think that when you're a representative of a minority, which I was, from the Jewish community, the truth of the matter is that if you're a conformist in the Conservative Party, you're fine. The Conservative Party has always embraced minorities who conform. But if you, in a sense, buck the trend and you're a bit independent-minded and you're inclined to pipe up for yourself, sometimes with discordant tunes, that's when the hostility starts. And I did get quite regular representations from people with profoundly bigoted views, which I proceeded to ignore.
Just a final question. When you look back at your time as Speaker of the House of Commons, what are you most proud of, and what would you consider to be your biggest mistake?
Philip, the thing I'm most proud of is empowering backbenchers, granting more urgent questions, granting emergency debates, granting more opportunities per se for MPs to question the Prime Minister and other ministers. I remember on one occasion, and it became quite a trend, but I remember on one occasion early on when I overran Prime Minister's questions, not least because the Prime Minister, David Cameron, had given quite full responses. I'm not sure I would call them answers, but he'd given quite full responses. And I overran by, at the time, what seemed to him to be an unacceptable 5 minutes. It got longer than that in subsequent years, as you know. And as he left the chamber, he rather waspishly said to me, "Mr. Speaker, I do have a plane to catch, And I said, "Yes, but with great respect, Prime Minister, it is your own plane. It's not going to go without you. And I think the rights of the House are important." So I'm very proud of the fact that I gave MPs more opportunity to speak up, including people with minority viewpoints. I remember Nadine Dorries once saying to me, "I've been so pleased that you gave me my head on the subject of same-sex marriage and on abortion. I thought you'd be biased." And I said, "Nadine, I always tried to persuade you that when you become the Speaker, you've got to allow all points of view to be heard." So I think I am very proud of the fact that I said I would be a champion of backbenchers, and I was a champion of backbenchers. What was my biggest mistake? Well, I don't know how long we've got. I made several. But I think that one big mistake I made, which probably isn't known to members of the public on any scale that you know about, Philip, was I mishandled the recruitment of the clerk in 2014. I felt I had a very good argument for splitting the roles of clerk and chief executive, which eventually did happen, because on the law of averages, is it likely that the principal constitutional advisor to the Speaker and the House, namely the Clerk of the House, would also top the class at the Harvard Business School? It's not very likely. And I took the view, well, let's have someone in charge of procedure, but that person shouldn't also be the chief executive if that person's got very little experience of the commercial sector and of how to manage things. And I tried to create a split, but I did it on the back of too little consultation. I did it in a rather hurried and maladroit fashion, and it caused ill feeling in the House, and I then had to backtrack. So I got my way eventually on the splitting of the two roles, but I handled it spectacularly badly. So that was one quite significant mistake. I don't believe in the death penalty, and even if I did, I don't think that it's a hanging offence, but I did make a mess of it.
John Bercow, thank you very much for your time and for your candour. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.